I'm Professor Robinson, and I am teaching current issues in technology. I'd like to welcome you all. I am very delighted to be a part of this experience. Today, I'm going to discuss some of the key points from Chapter 1 in the Koos and Posner's The Leadership Challenge book, which is the text for this course. I will try to keep my lectures brief. The book is pretty straightforward, and so there's not a lot of information that I have to go back over. What we really want to do at this time is just highlight the things that we should be focusing on during the discussions so that we all can exchange information and gain something from our own individual experiences. So without further ado, I'll start with the 5 exemplary practices of leadership, which is in the first chapter. One of the first points that the authors make in chapter 1 is that leadership can happen anywhere at any time. And I think they really want to drive home the idea that whether you are in a position of leadership, whether you have a title of leadership or not, there will always be an opportunity for you to lead. And so what I'm going to do is upload a clip from Remember the Titans, and it's a series of events that happen throughout the movie. And in this video, what I want you all to do is identify the times in which a leadership opportunity came up, and I want you to explain how the leader handled that situation. In the 5 practices of exemplary leadership, the authors point out the key things being: a leader must model the way, a leader must inspire a shared vision, a leader must challenge the process, enable others to act, and encourage the heart. Model the way is pretty straightforward in a sense that you have to set the example for those who are following you. And I have a case study about a teacher who was terminated for some behavior. And what I want you to do is take the information in the section on Model the Way, and I want you to read the case study, and I want you to try to identify whether or not the teacher was justified or unjustified. Whether the school district was justified or unjustified in terminating the instructor. Additionally, in inspiring a shared vision, I think we're all pretty clear that if you are a leader, you must be a visionary. You have to be able to see where you are as well as where you want to go. And you have to be clear on your vision before you are able to inspire others or to get others to buy into your vision. Now, one thing that I really do want to drive home is the section on challenging the process. Challenging the process it's critical because when we challenge the process, this is really how improvements are made. And what we have to understand about challenging the process is that this is what allows us to go from good to great, from okay to better. We can't feel like we've always done it this way and that's it. Because what will happen is we will become complacent, and complacency it kills motivation, it can kill a vision, it can hinder success. Complacency actually can ruin a business. We have so many business models out there where complacency set in, and suddenly they found themselves without a competitive advantage in the market. Take MySpace, for instance. At this point, they're probably sitting around wondering, what happened? How did we miss the mark? And I think that is a good example of failing to challenge the process. Now, I was discussing the idea of challenging the process with a manager who works at AT&T. And I said, how do you as a manager lead the individual who is the top performer? Their numbers are off the charts. They are always number 1, number 2. They're bringing in the revenue. They're meeting all the goals. However, that individual, that employee does not respect the process. They're always taking shortcuts. They're not documenting things as according to policy, and they're basically always taking the short way around, but they're making the results. I said, for you as a manager, your challenge is, do you tell this person, well, because you're producing, because I see the numbers, because you're bringing in the revenue, it's okay to break the rules? Or do you stop them and say, hold on, you have to follow this process. You have to go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3 to step 4. And as a result of that, you are going to be less successful because your numbers could potentially go down and you could, in fact, affect his pay. And what the manager told me is that in that situation, no, he wouldn't give the employee the go ahead to break the rules, because policies are there, and to say it's okay to break the rules would be setting a poor example. But also, he does not want to create an environment where the people he's leading cannot be successful. So he won't say, okay, regardless of how successful you want to be, you have to follow this process. And he said so, and the manager said to me, in that instance, I would look at the process and I would make sure that all the steps that are required, that we require, are beneficial. I would see if there's a different way to approach it, see if we can make some adjustments, even get feedback from that employee and say, well, why do you take this shortcut? Why are you able to close sales without going from step 1 to step 2 to step 3? And this is all about challenging the process. We have to stay innovative. We have to remain aware. And we, again, have to adapt with the changes in technology even. And so that's one of the things that I definitely wanted to point out about challenging the process. Now, they go on to speak about enabling others to act. This is all about empowerment. This is all about the fact that you as a leader, you can empower others, and that in turn will make you more powerful. Now, when I was leading a very large group in the IT department, I had 3 levels of employees. And my first level of employees were the first responders. They were the individuals who went out on the trouble calls, and there's a problem, and the user wants a solution right then and there. And a lot of times they were all over the building, all over campus. And so what I had to foster in my employees was, you are the one in charge at that time. You are representing this department. I would rather you go out, make the wrong decision, but try to solve the problem, than go out and not do anything at all, or call back to the help desk, call back to the level 2 team, call back to me looking for some advice, some way to feel like you can make a decision. If you can solve the problem, solve it. And that's what I want you to do. And the effect that this had on the entire group was that people started to become more hungry to learn more about their jobs and about the jobs that even the level 2 tech support would do. They were more eager and confident in solving problems. And in return, our customer service ratings were high, our response times were great, and we didn't have a lot of the redundant issues going to level 2 or level 3 when they could have been resolved at a level 1. So I always opened my staff meetings when we talked about decision making, and I said, well, who has the power? And the answer to that question is, whomever is making the decision at that time. That's who has the power. I don't care if you're not the team lead. I don't care if you're not the supervisor. It doesn't concern me if you're not the director, the CEO. You are empowered to make a decision and act on it. They talk about the importance of relationship building and encouraging the heart. And I think these two go hand in hand. And what you as a leader have to do is you have to make that connection with your constituents and those who are following you. It's impossible to lead a group of people just by your position alone. At some point, you're going to have to make a connection. And in our discussion, we are going to explore ways that we can make those connections. Also, how much exposure, how much should we as leaders expose ourselves, and if there are risks to that, because there are risks associated with that. Let me go back to modeling the way. And what I have is a clip from a movie. It's an audio file from a movie called My Fellow Americans, and it's about two former presidents. And in this scene, they are figuring out how they're going to expose a crime that took place. And one president looks to the other one and says, people are going to believe us. And the other president said, well, why? And he said, because we're presidents. And then right behind that, you hear crickets. I want you guys to listen to that audio file. Listen to the exchange that they have. And what I'm trying to point out here is that leadership is a process. It's not a position. And despite your title, if you have no followers, you're really not a leader. If people don't buy into you and what your vision is for your company or for your project, you're ineffective. And in turn, that makes you not a leader. So you have to remember that no, the people won't believe you just because you're the CEO. No, the people won't believe you just because you're the manager. You have to, again, model the way, encourage the heart, build a relationship. You have to inspire the shared vision. You have to put all those pieces together in order to be effective, because that's what this is all about learning how to be not just a leader by our positions or our titles, but being a leader by how effective we are.
Haney's behind the whole thing. Well, damn it, he's not going to get away with it. We'll go public. I'm going to call Kay Griffin. We'll go on TV and we'll tell him about Reynolds' murder and the helicopter explosion.
Are you crazy? We can't go public without evidence. We'll look like a couple of morons.
The people will believe us.
Why?
Because we're presidents. Okay, they won't believe us.
The 5 practices of exemplary leaders together, the authors come up with the 10 things that you must commit to as a leader to actually make this work. And they set those commitments out as clarifying your values, setting the example, envisioning the future, enlisting others to act, searching for opportunities, experimenting and taking risks, fostering collaboration, strengthening others, recognizing contributions, and celebrating the values and the victories. And I found a chart that kind of puts these two together, where they have the practice on the left side and the commitment on the right side. And I will upload that chart. But what I want you to do is look at this chart and just see how the practices go hand in hand with the commitments and how they line up. So let's talk for a second and let's get into where we want the discussion to go as far as chapter 1 is concerned. So some of the questions that I want you all to answer, and this is the way I'd like to handle this. I will post all of these questions in one discussion thread, and then I want you to select 2 or 3, at least 2 or 3 questions, and I want you to provide some response and answer and some feedback to that. And then what I also want you to do is go on and see what your counterparts, your colleagues are saying, and I want you to pick 2 posts from your classmates and respond to those. So, the first one being, what issues, if any, do you see with leading the generation of instantly successful individuals? Is the work your way up dream still relevant? And I say this because in the book, They talk about the retired executive who came back to turn the call center around. And he shared the story of how he started in the garage and he worked his way up. And he used that as a source of inspiration for the people that he was following. Well, the reality is today, because of the rapid changes in technology, because of the abundant access to information, because the global market is pretty much right at our fingertips, a lot of people are becoming highly successful long before they have any experience. And so you as a manager or as a supervisor, you may be faced with, or as a project leader, you may be faced with the challenge of leading someone who gained significant success early on. And what are the challenges with leading individuals like that? And then again, is the work your way up dream still alive? I mean, does anybody really stay with one company for 10, 20, 30, 40 years? Or are we at a point where we just, we can see what direction every company is going because we can Google them, we can watch the trends, we can gain information that we couldn't get like 30, 40 years ago. And so we jump ship and we are more strategic about our placement as employees versus commitment to one company. Also, what role does technology play in creating instant leaders? For example, Mark Zuckerberg. He became a leader because of technology and so rapidly. And so what I want to know from you is, what role do you think technology plays in situations like that where they create that dot-com millionaire, that instant, successor? Like the group who created Angry Birds. It's like overnight, they're leading this trend, right? And so can those leaders be effective if they're young, or young either by years or young in experience? And can they be effective, or should they have a track record like Dick in the first chapter? And let's talk about Pride Day at that call center. What do you see Pride Day as? Is this a valuable way of encouraging employees and getting them excited about what's going on in the company? Or is it like a forced social engineering, like brainwashing them and like, okay, we're just going to overwhelm them and force them to wear the company colors and the logo and buy into these slogans and sayings? And does that really help? Okay. Also, I want to know, what challenges does the abundant access to information via technology pose for businesses? What can we as leaders, what can we do to overcome those challenges, if any? Also, I want to know, why do you feel like shared values are so important? And how do you, as a leader, expose yourself to those who are following you? And are there any risks associated with that exposure? It's one thing to eat lunch with your employees once a week in the cafeteria or have coffee in the break room, but I guess it's a whole nother thing to say go to happy hour with your employees. And I mean, in some situations that may be appropriate, and some it may not. But what I want to know is, from your experience and your knowledge of exposure, I want to know what risks you see associated with that, building the relationship from the exposure side. Also, to meet or not to meet, that is the question. And this is something that you as a leader, whether it be a project leader, team leader, supervisor, CEO, head of the company, at some point you're going to have to decide, do we have a staff meeting and is it worth it? And this is something that if you decide to answer this question, I want you to put a lot of thought into it, because we have really, come really far in how we meet, how we gather everyone together. Now there's so much technology, there's so much instant communications. At some point we have to look around and say, is it really worth the money to corral everyone in a room to have one discussion with everybody in one location? Do we meet once a week bi-weekly. I mean, people are always exchanging emails. You have to understand there was a time when the meeting was the only time that the company staff were brought up to speed on what's going on. But now you can almost have an instant news feed, of what's going on in the company because of technology. And so I want you to just talk about the value of meeting, or how meetings have evolved and how we can adapt and adjust to that. Also, modeling the way is all about setting a good example for others to follow. And so I want you to read the case study about unprofessional conduct, and I want you to answer, did the teacher in the case study fail in modeling the way, in your opinion? If so, explain. If not, explain that too. And finally, for this section, I want you to talk about why it's critical for your leader to be competent, and how do we measure that competence. Now, for those of you who choose to answer this question, this will be very interesting because it's not very common for the head of a company to actually know how to perform the jobs of every single employee, especially when you're talking about situations like manufacturing, operations, information technology, computer programming. But how do we measure competence? What would make you say, yes, I have a competent leader? Is it based on the fact that they can walk out onto the sales floor and perform every job flawlessly? Or is it enough for them to just know what's going on, have a respect for the roles that we perform as the supporting staff, and then translate that into taking our company to the next step? Or is a competent leader just someone who's been in the business long enough, they've worked their way up, they've earned their stripes, and they have their education? Just explain to me why it's critical to have a competent leader and how you measure that. And so that concludes chapter 1. These are all topics that we want to spend the next week talking about and on the discussion feed. And also I'm going to go ahead and record a second lecture for chapter 2, and I will upload that either at the same time or in the next few days, and I'll have the very same discussion feed with a variety of questions. I just want you to pick 2 or 3 questions, respond to those, and then also respond to 2 questions of your constituents. Thank you.